In these days of more intense family life, we have a great opportunity to work at our love and to work at inserting the love of Jesus Christ into every moment of the day. A few weeks ago, I was explaining to a professor asked me about this whole idea of what does it mean? What is this reality? The whole idea of putting love into works. We were discussing the second chapter of James, or expressing our faith with loving works, as St. Paul says. And I remember a few years ago seeing a video of a mother who realized at one point that, this great discovery of putting love into each hour of the day, into each moment of the day, letting our heart expand in those moments. This is what truly gives life meaning. This is the one struggle that's worth it. This is the one struggle where we can be guaranteed victory. St. Paul will say, in Philippians, "For me to live is Christ, to die is gain." And if to live in the flesh, this is to me the fruit of labor. And what I shall choose, I know not. But I am straitened between two, having a desire to be dissolved and to be with Christ, a thing by far the better. And having this confidence that he's needful, knowing that he's needful to the Philippians, I know that I shall abide and continue with you all for your furtherance and joy of faith, that your rejoicing may abound in Christ Jesus for me. And so let your conversation be worthy of the gospel. But for me to live is Christ. Lord, we ask you that the foundation, we ask you that this be the real foundation, our love for you. And there's many ways we want this to be our foundation, especially in our family life, in these days of more intense family life. That our love for you be what drives our family life. And there are many aspects, or there are many particular realities of the humanity of Jesus Christ that could help us. Well, that could help us we could take one quality of Jesus Christ. Over the years, over the centuries, the church has given us devotion to the Sacred Heart, devotion to the Sacred Humanity. In the last century, devotion to the face of Jesus, devotion to the precious blood. All these different devotions, they help us to meditate on, to contemplate more deeply the extent of the love that Jesus has for us, the meaning of the love of Jesus Christ, and how we can start to participate in that love. We can take any one of these devotions, understanding it as an expression of the love of Jesus Christ, and it would help us to come to see the great joy that comes from participating in that love. This professor I was speaking about, he noted, once he understood a little bit the relation, the possibility of putting love into his work. He said to the entire group that was there, he said, "Oh, I like that idea. I think I do it more than 0% of the time." And of course, he wanted to learn more. The most recollected saint, the most thoughtful theologian, do what they will. They live in the world all day without being able to realize how much and in what ways they are indebted to God, how much they are receiving from him, living upon him, using him, immersed in him, how indispensable he is to us. It is a wonder that Jesus ever came to us. And yet he's indispensable to us at the same time. And these days especially, Lord, well, first of all, we thank you that we have you so close. These can be days where St. Josemaria would encourage us. He would encourage us in normal days as well, but perhaps giving a little bit more focus these days because of our circumstances. We could cultivate our compass being the tabernacle. Stopping and thinking, where am I right now in relation to the tabernacle? Or where am I right now in relation to the closest tabernacle, where Jesus Christ is present? It's a wonder that he's present, that he's come to us, that he's indispensable. And we want him at every turn, at every moment, at every turn of the page, or every scroll of the page, so long as it's not scrolling too much news. We acquire wisdom in life. We acquire joy. St. James also teaches us this. But we acquire wisdom and joy by seeking Jesus, by expressing our desires for him, by letting ourselves feel the real need that we have for him. There used to be, I don't know at what point now in the last 20 years, but there was the phrase, "I can't breathe." Well, for us, spiritually, that's true. We can't breathe without Jesus. And if we reflect on it, if we let this idea mature in our hearts, we'll see that there's something very delightful. There's something very good. There's something that makes us very happy. When we come to finally admit our utter dependence on Jesus Christ, because we can rest with him. He's our freedom. He liberates us. He liberates us from the bondage of our imperfections. We start to see that it actually is a kind of bondage. It's a kind of fever that we want to get rid of, that we cannot directly and actually think of Jesus Christ all day long, all day and all night. We know that for some saints, even their sleep becomes the subject of contemplating Jesus. Even their sleep is saturated with thoughts for Jesus. As we mature in the spiritual life, one of the things that brings us great joy is coming to understand, to see, to truly sense our complete dependence on Jesus. We learn more about him. We have more experiences of him in our lives, in the lives of those around us. Our love for him becomes a dominant passion, one that we see more and more how it can grow, how it can spread to different moments of the day, how we can express it in this hour of work, in that hour of work, in a meeting with someone. As we grow in the spiritual life, we become more sensitive, you might say, to the presence of Jesus, his necessity, his sweetness, the nature of his love. Authors will remind us that this is, of course, one of the signs of perseverance. When I was in Rome, we had the meeting once with a good and holy bishop who worked on the Congregation of Saints, and he said, well, when they start to study the lives of the saints, one of the things that they look at, they give more emphasis to, more weight to, is the last 10 years of the saint's life. Or, in this case, not the saint's life, right? In this case, it would be the person who's been proposed for sanctity. When they study the life of that person, they especially look at the last 10 years. Was there a real increase in love of Jesus Christ that led to a growth in holiness, an interest more in the others? Why? Because this is a sign of a person's perseverance, that they're growing in love for Jesus Christ. We can understand if we accept this, we can start to understand, it can become more clear to us that there is a kind of war that's going on. A war in men's hearts. And this war is a war of, whether or not the love of Jesus Christ reigns in their hearts or not. Whether or not the love of Jesus Christ reigns in their hearts. And one of the things that we see in the Bible, one of the truths that the Bible spells out for us, is the proliferation of sin. After original sin eventually, or very quickly, takes on a colossal magnitude. Yes, it's true that the moral law is written on men's hearts, but very rapidly there's confusion of the moral law. There's confusion of man's laws, of what morality contains, of his duties. There's a certain daring and audacity in wickedness. There's a loss of moral sense. Men become offended and seek vengeance at the slightest faults, the slightest mistakes. It seems that left unchecked, part of the punishment one of the punishment of sins is that we're free to sin. And then when we sin, all of the consequences of the sin flow. or all the effects of the sin follow. And this is, of course, what drives certain people crazy or gets them angry. Because why? Because they want to sin without feeling the bad effects. And if we were to extrapolate this and use our imagination a little bit and think it through, we can understand. And there are some people that do this, and they get very angry, or they become very sad, and then angry. But sin has this trajectory. It's always growing towards open rebellion against God, against His majesty. And this happens in us. It happens in us, we know, Lord, in smaller ways. There's a little rebel in each one of us. It's like the student once that told me, I was teaching a course on authority. And I think the title of the course was The Problem of Authority. And then this student came up after class and said, we should rename this class, My Problem with Authority. But one way to see our struggle to grow in love is that, well, we are part of the community of saints. And one of the motives for us to growing in love in these days, working especially on putting the love of God into each moment, is that, well, everywhere there's this war going on between those who love God and sin. And the love of God through acts of piety, through the sacraments, through acts of mercy, through prayer. Everywhere, the sacred humanity of Jesus, His perfections, they're warring down. They're cutting against this evil in detail. Right? This one author says, here, the love of Jesus is obliterating it, the evil. Here it is cutting off its past growths, making its future growth slower or of less dimensions. There it is with grace, or rendering it sterile, or wounding and weakening it, or making it cowardly and cautious. Upon all exhibitions of evil, the action of the love of Jesus Christ is incessant. At no time and in no place is it altogether inoperative. Let us see what the world would be like. Then the author says, well, let us see what the world would be like if we didn't have the perfections of Jesus Christ working in the world. And then we could imagine. We could imagine how sin would proliferate more and more. Sin would work earth into a hell. Men would become devils. This author notes, right, that on the one hand, we can understand how people without civilization and culture, they do terrible things, and it's obvious. Well, oftentimes what happens in civilization and culture is it essentially civilization becomes an excuse for high-minded barbarity or for high-minded evil. And that the more men become cultured and educated, the way that they do evil is more like the devils, it's more like the demons. It's more urbane. When sin is allowed to proliferate, men become like devils to others and themselves. Everything which makes life tolerable, which counteracts any evil, which softens any harshness, which sweetens any bitterness, which causes the machinery of society to work smoothly, is due to Jesus Christ and His perfections. There's so many good that we were speaking about this book, Dominion, in which the author has come to the realization of all the ways. It's hard to count them, but there are ways, and there are probably many more ways that we're not aware of, in which the presence of Jesus in the world, the presence of his love, has had an incredible impact on history. This author puts it a different way. There are many who think too highly of progress. They exaggerate the moralizing powers of civilization and refinement, which, apart from grace, are simply tyrannies of the few over the many, or of the public over the individual. Meanwhile, they underrate the corrupting capabilities of sin and attribute to unassisted nature many excellences, which it only catches, as it were, by infection from the proximity of grace, or by contagion from the touch of the church. I suppose in these days in which everyone is concerned about the virus, we could see on the one hand, you could see how the efforts to contain the virus could be like the church and the love of God, and the virus could be evil or sin, but you could also see it the other way. But if we see it, however we see it, I think it could help us to understand how our struggle to put the love of God more into our work, to put the love of God more into our family life, to put the love of God more into each moment of the day, well, it can lead us to get out of ourselves. It can lead us to be very concerned about the others. It can lead us to see that, well, there's something at stake, even if we're kind of stuck at home. There's a great struggle that can happen. There's a great good that can come about. There's great growth that can happen, which has an incredible impact on history, on the world. And we can be guaranteed of success in this struggle. And I think one way we could approach this is by understanding failure. Almost everybody is a failure in some way or another. There are some people, yes, who always think of themselves as successful, and they are convinced that they fail less than the rest of the world. But even those people will sometimes commit themselves to projects that, well, seem doomed to fail. We all know of the fellow who's trying to live forever. He can maybe set up an endowment that will last a long time, but he probably won't live forever. And so we all have to face failure at some point. Some of us feel failure more than others. If we pin all of our hopes on appearances, if we pin all of our hopes on the success, let's say, that the world has to offer, well, all of life could become, if we pin all of our hopes on, right, the recognition of human rights, something that's good, all of life could become a disappointment without the love of God. Why? Because we could see failure everywhere. It's like the one professor that came to the conclusion, critique is all there is. Because he couldn't see the possibility of without God, of anything doing any good, of anybody doing any good. And this is why piety is so important. Because piety, religion, if we're piety can never fail. If our goal is God, and we want to tell God that we love him, once we say, Jesus, I love you, we've won. We've hit the mark. We haven't wasted our energy. Every hope is fulfilled beyond our expectations. Every effort that we make is rewarded in a disproportionate way. Jesus cannot be outdone in generosity. Every means is turned marvelously into an end. Because God, our final and true end, is in it. In piety, every battle is a victory, simply because it's a battle. Even apparent defeats have triumphs in them. It can be a great triumph to make a good act of reparation. It's a great triumph to seemingly fail and begin again. No life is a failure that is lived for God. All lives are failures that are lived apart from God. Piety is the only guarantee of success. Let's thank our Lord for this true foundation that we have, which is our love for him. Remember, as St. Paul reminds us, for me to live is Christ. We have a great opportunity these days to learn how to deal with failure. But even more than that, we have a great opportunity these days to grow in love, to grow in our awareness of the presence of Jesus Christ, to exercise real piety by expressing our love for him frequently throughout the day, at the beginning and end of tasks, at the beginning and end of times together. Of seeing how the perfections of Jesus Christ, how we can imitate them in every moment of the day. We can be contemplating them in every moment of the day. Without Jesus Christ, a pestilence is just a pestilence. It's an Egyptian pestilence. With Jesus Christ, yes, there might be some suffering. But with Jesus Christ, with his perfections, with his love, even these apparent failures, these apparent difficulties, right, they become for us wonderful opportunities, wonderful occasions to grow in love for God, and to grow in love for others because of our love for God. Let's turn to Mary, Mother of Pure Love, and let's ask her that we can use this time to grow in love for her Son, Jesus Christ. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask your help to put them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.